Time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and this is the Ride or Dynasty podcast. Tonight is part 2 of our 2021 rookie preview. We will be breaking down the wide receiver and tight end positions. And to do that, I am joined by my fellow pod brothers, Eric and Don. Now, are you two still talking after last week's upset?
Let's go!
Yeah,
got anything to say, Don? You excited this week?
Oh, it's always exciting. How can you go wrong? 11-1 is still really, really good. It's not a problem. In some ways, it's actually nice to get over that and get the first loss out of the way so that the whole perfect season nonsense can go away. Now, what I am truly worried about is the injuries that are starting to really stack up, but that's league-wide, so we'll see.
Yeah, get used to it. Also with us tonight, the Devi Dirtbag himself, Ryan Bickerstaff. How you doing, Ryan?
Oh, I'm pretty good, JJ. I'd be doing a lot better if my Cyberpunk 2077 actually arrived on time, but I think I'll get over it in the end, and I am psyched to talk some wide receivers here tonight.
If I understood any of the words you said, I would respond, but I do not. Also joining us tonight for the first time in a little while, and we're glad to have him back, Kyle Allen. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be welcomed back. I'm glad you want me here.
Oh, I want you more than you'll ever know, my friend.
First time for everything.
Well, maybe we should edit that part out. Well, do me a favor and hit subscribe and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at Ride or Dynasty. And you can find all of our latest articles on rideordynasty.com. Now, check out the Rule of 3 podcast with Jared, Brendan, and Blair. This week, they discussed their must-stash players heading into the offseason. I personally agree with Brendan and his suggestion to start accumulating disappointing rookie tight ends. To hear the rest of their sage advice, tune in to the Rule of 3 podcast. Now, before we get to our main topic tonight, let's check on injuries with our man, Kyle Allen.
Next man up. We always pride ourselves on the next man up. It's always talking about the next man up. It's the next man up league. Hey man, next man up. That kind of hurted me though.
Starting us off, we're going to talk about a couple of running backs that have some injuries going on. The first one we're going to talk about is a nagging injury in Joe Mixon. Mixon's already been ruled out for Week 14, much to the chagrin of many of his fantasy managers. I know he's one of JJ's favorites. He has not played in a while. He's been out since Week 6 with a foot injury. The Bengals are now well out of playoff contention. It makes sense for them to go ahead and shut him down for the rest of the year, quite frankly, but we really won't know until the coaching staff tells us more. In the meantime, Giovanni Bernard will continue to serve as the lead back for Cincinnati. This week he faces the Dallas Cowboys, who were gashed by the Ravens last week for 294 yards. Week 15, he draws the stout Steelers defense, but in Week 16, he'll face off against the Texans, who have the 31st defense against running backs in fantasy. So Gio's going to be hit or miss over the next couple of weeks, but he should be a solid flex play in Week 14 and 16.
Any chance that Joe Mixon comes back this season or no?
I really don't know. The Bengals haven't released a lot of information on what exactly he's dealing with. Everywhere you look, it's just foot injury. So that could be anything from, a high ankle sprain to turf toe to, a fracture and a bone in his foot. We don't really know. It seemed like he had a chance to play last week, and then last second they said no, he wasn't ready. So we really don't know. I don't know if the Bengals are kind of playing hard to get with him, just acting like they're going to play him so other teams don't really know how to prepare, but I think they've been able to hold them in check.
Who else do you have for us today?
So, as I talked about some turf toe, we have Antonio Gibson, the dynasty darling. He suffered a turf toe injury, which is hyperextension of the metatarsal phalangeal joint, where your big toe meets the ball of your foot. It's mostly a injury where there's not really a risk for any further damage. It's more of an issue of pain tolerance. The median return to play for NFL players is around 28 days. So others that have suffered this injury this season are Philip Lindsay and Zach Moss. Both of them missed right around a month. So it's not unrealistic to expect Antonio Gibson to be out for at least a couple of weeks, if not through the fantasy playoffs, which leaves us with J.D. McKissic and Peyton Barber as the primary beneficiaries. J.D. McKissic, for PPR purposes, went crazy last week, and I would expect him to continue to see a high target volume. And shout out to JJ making a heads-up ad in our Dynasty League. He picked up Michael Warren, who Washington just signed from their practice squad. He may see some relief play, get a little bit of run. We'll see how he does.
Well, Michael Warren, I have to admit, was a recommendation from our very own, the Devi Dirtbag.
Look at how it comes full circle. We're just getting everybody involved.
Mike Warren was out of Cincinnati, correct, Ryan?
Correct, and he's born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, my hometown. So that's how I knew about him. He's just he put up crazy numbers in high school.
Yeah, and I was excited to see what he would do on the Eagles. I thought they could definitely use him as the power back behind tiny Boston Scott and oft-injured Miles Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
But he seemed to have soured, so I'm very glad that he got picked up again by the football team.
That's still so weird.
I still like it, though.
Let's go.
All right, who's next?
Alrighty, next up. So, speaking of disappointing injuries, Kenny Galladay. He has been one of the most disappointing players to have on your team in fantasy this season, but it's not because of his on-field performance. It's because he hasn't been on the field. He's only played 4 games this season. Heading into week 14, he is still not practiced due to a hip injury. Last week, he was seen running sprints in the end zone prior to the game, but it's unclear if he suffered a setback or that he just wasn't fully ready and they were doing that just to kind of test him. There's currently no indication of when he may be able to play, and the Lions historically do not share very much injury, and unfortunately, we don't know much more than that. So it's difficult kind of to expect when he may be back. In the meantime, Marvin Jones is still a very startable player, I think, in a flex position. And look for Quintez Cephas to see a lot more run. They cut Marvin Hall this week. They've been making a lot of interesting moves to try to get younger players. I expect Quintez Cephas to get a lot more run.
And if you have missed out on Quintez Cephas, look for the one and the only Jamal Agnew, who is the guy right behind Cephas, who they really wanted to give run to, which is why they call. So I'm excited to see if Jamal Agnew gets any plays.
Well, speaking of rookies, not quite a rookie yet. Hopefully he will be. Let's talk about a Devi guy. We have Justin Ross from Clemson. Now, Ryan, I might need a little help here from you.
All right.
So he had a fantastic first 2 seasons at Clemson. I believe he was named All-Conference ACC. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it was first, second, third team, but yeah, that sounds right.
So he looked great in his first 2 seasons, and then right before his junior year was going to start, it was announced that he was going to miss the entire season for medical reasons. They discovered in spring camp he got hit and started having symptoms of like a stinger. He was having numbness going down his arms, wasn't really sure what was going on. They did an x-ray of his neck and found that he had a congenital fusion, which is where your cervical spine, which is the 7 vertebrae that make up your neck, they failed a segment during the early stages of development. So while he was still in his mother's womb, this happened. It's a congenital thing. It happened a long time ago, but it often gets discovered later when you have something like this and you start having symptoms. There's obviously an increased risk for decreased range of motion, pain, even permanent nerve damage with something like this. So it was of great concern, not only to Clemson, but to Justin Ross and his family, moving forward in the future. Good news is Ross had successful surgery to relieve this malformation, and he's begun training. He's posted some videos on his social media running on a treadmill underwater, which helps, reduce resistance and things like that, reduce impact. However, it's good to see him moving. He met with his surgeon, Dr. David Okonkwo, earlier this week for testing and evaluation of his progress. So it's still possible that he could play again in the future, but he will need clearance from his surgical. We don't know any test results yet. However, his head coach, Dabo Swinney, is expected to address the media on Sunday evening, so we hope to hear an update by then.
It's very interesting because this guy was absolutely surefire first-round pick and was talked about as one of the first 3 wide receivers off the board coming into this year, simply because of playing with Lawrence and in that ridiculously dynamic offense. But himself, a hyper-athletic guy. So there's a lot of hope for him. Fortunately, he still has 2 years of eligibility left, so if it's in his best interest to go back to Clemson, that's certainly an option for him, or he would be technically draft eligible this year should he decide to want to come out.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if he is cleared to play again, if he'll go ahead and declare with such a stout wide receiver class this year, or if he'll wait. It would obviously behoove him to go back for another year to get, prove that he can do it, prove it to himself probably. I don't know. What do you think, Ryan?
Had this not come up, he could have been a top 3 receiver in this class. And so he has that kind of upside, but he needs to go out there and prove it for a year. Can he stay healthy? Is this something that isn't going to end up affecting him down the road? Because, I wouldn't be if he declared this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go undrafted, just because maybe not
the fear of the unknown.
The fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be a first rounder. Absolutely not. I wouldn't even see second, third. Why are you going to put capital on a guy? There's a good chance he won't ever play again.
Not to disagree with you, Ryan. There is no way in hell, if I was Justin Ross, I would ever play it down a free football again. I would rather be an undrafted free agent or like something ridiculously low than playing free football. He has X amount of snaps in his career left. I'm not giving any of those. That's just my opinion.
Oh, that's a fair point, too.
He has to capitalize, make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah.
I'm sure some team would put a 7th on him.
There's absolutely an argument for both sides. Obviously, we know the talent is there, but the question is, how well is he recovered, and will there be any long-term effects? Because this is such a rare disease and something, and such a high-profile athlete to suddenly be discovered at this point is really rare. Like, in my research, I couldn't find anything else where it was all of a sudden a football player, in the beginnings of the prime of his career, it was discovered that he had something like this. So it'll definitely be interesting moving forward. Obviously, we're hoping and praying for a speedy recovery and that he can get back on the field, but glad that he's obviously able to function.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, do you have any other injury questions for Kyle?
The one that gets me right now is Swift in Detroit. I'm just so curious to find out if that's a concussion or if he's got something else that we haven't heard about.
Yeah, that one's really interesting to me. Last week, Adrian Peterson was quoted saying that he didn't have the same energy about him. And towards the end of the week after it was announced that he had cleared concussion protocol, it was, Adrian Peterson said that, and it was kind of interesting to me because then he was suddenly listed as illness, but it doesn't say what kind of illness he had. And he was limited in practice at the beginning of practice this week. He was limited, and so it's kind of like, is it still residual from the concussion? Is he actually sick? We don't really know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, concussions aren't a linear injury where you have, like a high ankle sprain or something. It's like, okay, we can say it's X amount of weeks that he'll be expected to be out. Concussions affect everybody differently, and it depends on the severity, how many you've had in the past. There's a lot of factors. It really just kind of depends on when you stop having symptoms. So it's kind of unclear at this point, and unfortunately, again, he's on the Lions, and they do not divulge very much injury info.
Well, let's check on the news. Man, oh man, I finally sat down this weekend, gentlemen, because of our podcast lab, and I watched some college football. I did. It's true. Brock Purdy sure looked good against West Virginia.
Way to take the high
You see
road.
what I didn't do there.
Way to take the high road.
Didn't fall for it. But he was really throwing the ball with some zip and accuracy. He showed a little wiggle in his run. I thought he showed a little bit of a pro-level talent. I liked what I saw. I mean, it was a small sampling, and it was against West Virginia. But he definitely has pro traits, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've been saying it for 2 years now. I might have been a little bit high on him in the beginning. Expectations tempered now a little bit. He has been down this year from what he showed as a freshman and sophomore. But, yeah, he definitely has an NFL-level arm. He is just a tough, gritty player. Like, he will go out there and get you a gutty win. He does put a lot of good things out there on film, and he might not be a first-round pick or a second-rounder, but I could see a team looking for a solid backup with upside, spending a third or fourth on him.
I finally caught a glimpse of Coastal Carolina. They looked really good, but very gimmicky. What kind of offense do they run? They were saying it's a spread option. What the F is a spread option?
It's a winner.
Okay, here's what the spread option functionally is. It's what happens when you take the West Coast style of a crazy passing offense with a fully spread concept, multiple wide receiver sets, and then you start running a power option cycle out of that. A lot of pulling linemen, a lot of misdirection, and just a lot of shenanigans. When you said it was gimmicky, you're absolutely right. There is so much misdirection that it's essentially if you took an Air Force-style triple option or one of the Service Academy-style triple options, but spread the wide receivers from the line of scrimmage further out to the margins and add a quarterback with throwing capability. You set up the funky run option, and then you run an RPO off the funky run option look.
Who is their running back? Marable? No, Marable.
Marable, yeah.
Because his name looked like marble. Marable. I thought he looked electric with the ball in his hand, but he was having wide open running lanes. So I didn't really know if that was him or if it's just this scheme. that was getting him open. So I had a lot of questions watching that game. One thing that did stand out to me, BYU, so their quarterback, Zach Wilson, kept throwing the ball deep. And for some reason, the announcer kept saying he can throw the ball 75 yards in the air. He seemed to be stuck on this because at one point at the end of the first half, he threw a Hail Mary from 60 yards out. And he said he threw that from 75 yards out. And he said it a third time in the second half. So he must have had a note that this dude can throw 75 yards. But Zach Wilson does have a pretty solid arm, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he put some zip on the ball. That throw at the end of the game, too. I mean, that was a dart down to the 2-yard line, and the guy didn't get in. But, I mean, he's definitely got an arm, and he can throw from, a lot of different platforms and on the move. He's really comfortable with that. So I don't think, I was hoping we would kind of get to see him light it up a little bit in that game, and we didn't really get to see that. But I am still a fan. He's definitely to play at the NFL.
Also in college football, I saw this come across. Freshman 6'2" wide receiver Corey Rucker went 9 for 310 yards and 4 TDs for Arkansas State. Now, normally I wouldn't pay attention. However, in my Hyperbole League with Todd Kislingberry, I have the pipeline for Arkansas State, and I am very excited. Do we know anything about this guy?
No, but thank you for putting him on my radar. I'll do some research later tonight.
Yeah, this is
he hasn't done
the mega coming out
definitely
party.
His biggest game. But yeah, I mean, 6'2", true freshman. I like to see those big games coming up. So on to NFL news. Larry Fitzgerald had a major COVID scare. He's still not fully recovered. He just got released from the COVID list, but he is suffering some after effects. My question to the panel is, maybe it's a statement. I wonder how many players who have gone on the COVID list, right? We just see they get a C, they're out for a couple days, they come back. I wonder how many of those players actually had a full-on COVID case like Larry Fitzgerald is going through.
Probably not many that I've heard of, because I feel like we would have heard about it by now. Like, I was reading something earlier today. It said Fitzgerald lost 9 pounds, and at one point he decided he was going to update his will. Like, he legit feared for his life.
Yeah.
And, obviously it's a serious disease, but most of these guys are super young, super fit, and by virtue of those things have great immune systems. And obviously Fitzgerald's one of the older players in the league, and we can all make jokes about that, but he's still in incredible shape, and I'm sure his immune system's fine. It's good.
I was just going to say, there have been some weird ones, though. I mean,
yeah.
I think Raquel Armstead.
Yep.
That's the one I was just about to bring up.
A.J. Dillon, I haven't heard anything bad, but he's been on the COVID list for about a month. So
he just holds it all in his thighs.
Yeah, well, I mean, is he just testing positive, or is he okay?
But a serious question. Raquel Armstead went on the COVID list during the preseason.
Yeah.
He has not been removed from the COVID list.
He's been admitted to the hospital multiple times this season. Like, he's just not shaking it.
Okay, see, I didn't hear that. I haven't heard any of that.
One of the
I
knocks.
don't know if that was twice right at the beginning of the year, like when he first had it, and he just hasn't got back into playing shape, so they haven't brought him back, or what?
One of the knocks on the whole situation is there's been so little released as to who's asymptomatic, who is not asymptomatic, or who has mild symptoms. So only way we really follow this whole deal is just by the duration these guys are on the list.
Yeah, sort of like what we're going through at school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, we don't know any of the details. Yeah, I was just a little weirded out by Raquel Armstead because the COVID list is supposed to be like a 3 to 4 week thing, and he's been on there a long time. But thanks for that additional information. Now, I did see that Brendan will be happy because the Bills just re-signed Brandon Beane through 2025. Is there a better GM right now in the NFL than Brandon Beane?
They've done a good job there. I don't know. I think a lot of us were anti Josh Allen, and that one's really come back to bite us. I mean, he looks fantastic, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being stubborn, but I still feel like the process of that pick was. So I don't know. I don't know if I can think of a better GM off the top of my head, but I'm hesitant to give him too much credit, even though he was right.
Yeah, I'm still not on the Josh Allen bandwagon. I still don't believe he's going to fold under pressure.
I'm curious to see what happens next year when Brian Dable is off head coaching somewhere and Josh Allen doesn't have him there anymore.
Well, we can see what happens to a good young quarterback when they lose their OC and their QB coach, when we look at Carson Wentz.
Absolutely.
Carson Wentz was, if it wasn't for an injury, he would have been the MVP of the league. And now he got benched for Jalen Hurts. I mean, that's a pretty precipitous fall. It makes me really wonder, like you said, like if they lose that coach, what happens? I just think what they've built, though, around Josh Allen's weaknesses and how they have covered for those is an amazing building of a team. And he's done very well to build an offense that can thrive with Josh Allen.
Yep. The other thing about Buffalo that you have to love is that, I mean, they've taken a lot of shots at free agency, but their misses have been calculated risks and small misses. Like the Josh Norman contract is eminently survivable. And even though it hasn't worked out nearly the way they wanted, it's a so what kind of deal. It's just, oh, well, it didn't work. It's not like they're making the $100 million whiff that's going to cripple a franchise.
Now, I know we're finishing up the news and probably our longest pre-main segment we've done on this pod. But for the record, how in the hell did the wide receiver that my New York Jets drafted in the 4th round after we picked our Darius Stewart in the 3rd have a great week last week? Putting up 5 for 101. Chad Hansen. What the hell is that? Where did that come from? Nobody's with me on Chad Hansen?
I mean, no, I'm with you. That's
Unbelievable.
That's one I hadn't heard that name in a while, and I mean that's just out of nowhere.
The amazing thing for Chad Hansen is he had a decent rookie year. Well, he played in 15 games. He didn't really have any catches. He was like 9 catches, 10 catches, something. He outplayed our Darius. Never did anything in the NFL. But Chad Hansen then got cut and picked up and was on practice squads for 3 years before getting his shot. That's pretty impressive to stick in the NFL. This was his first appearance since his rookie year.
Well, not to burst your bubble, but the Texans sent him back to the practice squad.
Did they right away?
Yeah, 2 days ago.
Oh,
After
well,
that. I'm
I'm not picking him up.
Yeah, they're protecting
saying,
him, but they'll probably activate him again if they're short at receiver, which after Will Fuller, they probably will be.
It's just amazing to me the stick-to-itiveness of some players
absolutely.
Who will last in the NFL grinding on practice squads. Because he was on the Patriots. He was on a few different teams before he even made it to. So good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, so I've got to head out a little bit early. If you'd like to find me on Twitter, I'm at @KAllen_4. Look out for the next man up, the written injury report. It'll have everybody that's fantasy relevant that has an injury or question heading into the weekend on our website, rideordynasty.com. Peace.
Kyle, thanks so much for showing up. Kyle just got home from work. He's literally still in his scrubs. Thank you for everything that you do, and we'll catch you on the next one, buddy.
Of course. See y'all next time.
Thanks, Kyle, for stopping on. We'll miss you. Now it's time to jump into the main topic of the night, the 2021 wide receiver rookie class. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think this is much deeper than last year's class. Ryan, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a class that's 7 deep, receivers that you could argue have first round talent. And then I could see 30 receivers being drafted at least.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's a big number. I haven't done my due diligence on every receiver that's entering this class.
Yeah.
But we have 25 that we're at least going to mention tonight, and there are going to be many more that I know I've missed. And
let's just start at the top of the class. Jamar Chase was the creme de la creme at the end of last season. Don, do you still have him at the top of your list?
Yeah, he's my number 2 this year right now, and it's simply because of the year off and the recency bias. There's a very real chance that he could climb back to number 1 when they go through the real draft process and he enters the combine and everything, and the league really gets a good look at him. Dude's 6 foot, solid frame, good body mass, very technical route runner, and was by far the best wide receiver on that just filthy LSU staff last year. So he's got all the potential in the world, but the recency bias and the whole year off of football kind of allows him to slide back to the pack a bit.
Eric, do you have Chase above or below Justin Jefferson?
I have him above Jefferson as a prospect. I think Chase is awesome. His production was absolutely ridiculous, something like 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns on that championship LSU team from last year. He was their top wide receiver. So obviously I don't think it's fair at all to say, okay, well, Chase was better last year at LSU, so he's going to come in and be better than Justin Jefferson has been. Realistic. But as a prospect, I think he's better and a fantastic wide receiver prospect.
Now, Ryan, because he chose to opt out, is he suffering the same thing that Trey Lance is suffering from, where he might have been like in the conversation for 3 or 4, but now he's dropped? How far is Chase dropping in your ranking?
I just have him number 2 behind Devontae Smith right now. I don't know. It's a toss-up. If you prefer one over the other, I'm not going to argue with you. It is kind of partially the recency bias, but I'm also looking at the situation there at LSU, and I know a lot of people want to throw Jamar Chase's 1,700 yards last year out like, oh, look at his stats. In that offense this year, Jamar Chase was going to put up 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, and everyone would be like, oh my God, what's happening to him? And so the fact that he's only dropped 1 spot is, I think the opt-out actually helped him in a lot of ways.
The league is absolutely
that makes sense.
The league is absolutely smarter than a stat line. When they go into the real process, they go through the interviews and everything. And because he stepped away from the team, he can work with a pro and a personal coach. This guy's getting top-level training for sure.
So now, Devonta Smith, I know... Don, do you have him as number 1 like Ryan does?
I have Devonta Smith number 1. Yes, I do.
Eric?
I wouldn't put him number 1. I think I think you can make the case for him anywhere from 2 to 4. I like a couple of the guys we're going to later a lot at this point. But I will say with Devonta Smith, I mean, last year when I watched Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs at Alabama, I mean, Smith just kept jumping off the screen, and I kept watching, and I'd be watching Jerry Jeudy and going, wow, I know Jerry Jeudy's the best receiver on this team, but like, are we sure he's the best wide receiver on this team? So I was really surprised to see him go back for a senior year, and I'm glad to see that he's getting a lot of draft hype this year.
Ryan, you're huge on Alabama players in general.
Yes.
So I always take your opinion on Alabama players with a grain of salt. Do I have to worry about the fact that he weighs 160 pounds? That's light.
He's like 175, and yeah, he is a very small-framed guy.
He looks like Snoop Dogg, like early 90s Snoop Dogg playing wide receiver. He's skinny.
Yeah, he is tall and lanky like that.
I could see him after a couple of years in the NFL putting on like 10 to 15 pounds. You get him into a weight and training program in the pros, and they're going to help him bulk up a little.
So now who are we looking at below Chase and Smith? So, I mean, Eric's the only one who doesn't have Smith as number 1. Eric, who is your number 1?
Chase. I'm taking Chase 1, and then it's kind of a grouping, I guess, where you're a couple of...
Okay, so who else is in that next group for you, Eric?
So I really like Rashad Bateman for Minnesota. See him be a thorn in Penn State's side last season. He's a great wide receiver prospect, really good size. I think he was better than Tyler Johnson at Minnesota. I think Tyler Johnson was a fantastic college. And then the other guy I really like is Rondale Moore. The problem with Rondale Moore is we haven't seen him play much. He opted out this year, and he played 4 games the past. He just had an absolutely incredible freshman season, so I could see him slipping a little bit down the list in the eyes of NFL teams, not having that much film to.
Well, looking at the rankings, I did a little rough ranking of my own between some of the people I follow. Travis May, DLF, Ryan. Rondale Moore is currently the consensus number 4 among us. Now, I know that, Ryan, you have Bateman ahead of him, and you also have Jalen Waddle ahead of him. Tell me about Waddle.
Oh, Waddle has Tyreek Hill kind of upside. He's one of the fastest players in the country. It's really unfortunate that we're not going to get to see how fast he runs the 40 at the combine. He had the full Dak Prescott kind of happen to him. And just at end of this season and possibly his college career, he's already locked up first round status. If he declares this year, he will be a first round draft pick. And
do we have to worry about that injury though, Don?
Long term, it's hard to say without. That's actually a Kyle question, really. It seems more like a break, and it doesn't sound like there was a lot of tendon damage, which is very positive for the long-term prognostics because the bones usually heal and are just fine afterwards, whereas the tendons, after they have to be surgically replaced, that's always kind of a worry. So I expect him to recover completely from this one. But I would imagine that his college career is done and that he's going to be off to the pros because, as Ryan said, he's definitely locked up. And this is going to be the first time in history that we have a school put out 2 first-round wide receivers in consecutive years, which is unbelievable.
There's going to be a 5th one next year.
Well, let's just hope that they all start producing. Just because you can score against the Greg Williams defense doesn't mean you're hitting as a rookie.
That's very true.
I think almost anybody could have scored on Lamar Jackson on that play. The not good Lamar Jackson. Now, you actually have somebody who surprises me in your top 5, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
I know you did a debrief on him. I am not a fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
No?
Tell me why I should be.
Oh, the dude's a stud. He's one of the best route runners in the nation. I mean, this dude's looked pro-ready since he was 19 years old. He's only gotten better each year he's been in college. He's shown that consistent progression. He was a 1,000-yard receiver last year, even despite Michael Pittman taking somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 receptions and 1,200 receiving yards. St. Brown is he's a baller. He's one of the toughest players on the field. He's fast, explosive off the line. He just pops on film.
So here's my question. He's what, finishing his junior year?
Yes.
We all know he had a big game last weekend. Before that game, he had 9 career touchdowns. That is shockingly low. Like when I was putting together the stats, because I did them before this last weekend's games, he was easily the lowest of touchdowns per games of anybody you had ranked. So I ask again, why can't he score against in his average college competition?
He does.
And is he just going to be Equanimous?
Oh,
Part
he's
2.
way better than Equanimous. Wow. No, they're not even comparable.
I agree. He's better, but I think Equanimous scares me a little because I think it's easy to forget how much hype he got earlier in his college career too. And then he fell off and ended up as a 6th-round pick. I think he slid a little further than people expected. But I mean, I'm not saying they are the same player, but I think there are some similarities. There's enough to give me a little bit of pause there.
Bear in mind, though, that he was blocked last year by an absolute stud at wide receiver who's now playing for the Colts. That was a touchdown machine.
Everybody is. Everybody has competition on their team. You have to be able to score. You have to be able to score touchdowns.
See,
I just don't understand being so dominant how he can't score TDs. It's not like they didn't have good QBs at USC.
That's true. They've had Slovis the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, they use him primarily between the 20s, and they're just starting to kind of use him a little bit more as that red zone weapon.
If I'm not mistaken, though, USC's only 4 games into their schedule now, right?
Yes, yeah. 4 or 5, yeah. So, I mean, there's time. For me, touchdowns are the one stat I put the least amount of stock in. They're so fluky. You see a guy one year who will score in the double digits, and then he has 3 the next. It's one of those things. I look for yards, I look for receptions, because that's where you're going to be able to make most of your projections. And touchdowns are kind of just icing on the cake. But as far as the makeup you want to see in a wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown has it all.
Now, I will say that on the overall rankings, I have Terrence Marshall ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we could segue into a next guy here. Terrence Marshall is just 6'4", a beast, and until he opted out earlier this year, was absolutely stepping into the vacancy in LSU for all those catches and targets, and just absolutely exploded onto the scene after being, believe it or not, the wide receiver 4 last year in that absolutely ridiculous wide receiver crop. And he's going to come out this year and be an absolute weapon for somebody who's going to get a sideline to sideline kind of edge wide receiver here. That's going to be great. And he's going in the first round for sure for me.
Eric, where do you have Terrace Marshall?
Yeah, I have him in that next group. And at this point, I'm not clearly ranking people, but to me, he's behind the Bateman, more Smith tier, and more with Jalen Waddle in that next grouping. I mean, he is another really productive receiver, certainly. So I don't have any arguments with him there, but I'm not as high on him as some.
I do like that his name is Terrace and not Terrence.
Yeah, that throws me.
I actually kind of like that. So I'm all in for Terrace. What about Tylan Wallace? A lot of people have him in their top 8. Oklahoma State. Is this somebody I should watch out for, Ryan?
I like Tylan Wallace. I have him a little bit lower than... I have him at 13. Lucky 13. He's good. I don't dislike what I see on film. I'm very skeptical of Oklahoma State products, though. You see a guy like James Washington, who was, wasn't he a Biletnikoff winner?
Yeah, he was. He had monster numbers in that offense. He was a second-round pick to the Steelers. He's emerging this year.
A little bit. He flashed a little bit last year, too, but I don't think he's ever going to be anything more than that 3 or 4 option. So is that what we're getting in Tylan Wallace? I don't know. So the 13th overall receiver in this year's class is like an early 3rd-round pick. So
yeah, you definitely have a lot of guys ranked above him. Which tier do you have Tylan Wallace in?
Oh, the tier that's 8 through 15 is all one tier. Like, if you want to argue for any of those guys at any slot, you won't hear an argument out of me because you can just pick a name from that tier. They're they're very close.
To me, this grouping you've got going is like the but column because they all have these kind of interesting caveats going with them, like Tylan Wallace and another guy who falls into this grouping is Surratt, who just have had miserable quarterback play to deal with and yet have still been productive. You've got guys who may or may not come out, like Jahan Dotson, and then you've got a Chris Olive who's been productive and scores touchdowns but doesn't get a whole lot of yards in the Ohio State system. So it's kind of an odd deal.
Now, Eric, I know he mentioned one of our local players, Jahan Dotson.
Yeah,
the pride of Nazareth.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about Jahan?
I love Jahan. I think I mentioned him before the season as the player I was most excited to watch on this Penn State team, and as it turns out, he's not just the most enjoyable player to watch on this Penn State team. He might be the only enjoyable player to watch on this Penn State team. So he's really suffered, I think, in a rough offense that doesn't want to throw the ball or can't throw the ball. Had some rough quarterback play. When they get him the ball, he's electric both before and after the catch. He's not a super big wide receiver, but he's had some incredible jump ball catches. Just goes up and gets it. Great hands. So, and you can move him all around the field too, and play him in the slot or outside. He can really do it all. I don't know, as Don alluded to, I don't know if he's really going to. I think.
Now, Reddit user Different Fox asked us about Jahan Dotson. He also asked about another Minnesota receiver who I haven't heard anything about, Chris Autumn Bell. Does that ring anybody's
bell?
Shame.
Yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh,
I got shamed. Shame.
He is solid. He could definitely stand to go back to school for one more year and significantly increase his draft stock. Go back for your senior year, be the number 1 guy. So see if you can do it. As it stands right now, I think I looked up his stats earlier. I think he's at 371 receiving yards and a handful of touchdowns. So he's been fairly productive. He put some nice things on film. I don't think he's ready.
Yeah, he has a little over 70 receptions for 1,100 yards, 6 TDs for his career so far. It's pretty low.
He was the 3rd receiver last year when the Minnesota offense was actually really cooking. And then this year, the whole Minnesota offense has just kind of taken a step back. He's moved into the wide receiver 2 role there. And, there's potential. And it's essential now that as Bateman moves on to the NFL for sure, that I think he's going to get the lion's share of the targets next year. So it behooves him to go back to school, especially with the wide receiver class that could be historic coming out now. He could probably make himself some more money if he returns to college and really lights it up.
So looking at that 3rd tier, we mentioned Sage Surratt. We mentioned Tylan Wallace, Jahan Dotson. You mentioned Chris Olave.
Yeah.
What's up with Chris Olave? Ohio State? Is he the next Terry McLaurin? Is he the next Michael Thomas? Or is he the next Paris Campbell?
He's not quite the athlete Terry McLaurin is. He's not as physically dominant as Michael Thomas is. He's not the athlete that Paris Campbell is either. He has shown durability. He is reliable. He's just a good receiver. I think he'll be one of those guys that's like a solid, like, number 2 option on an NFL team. Maybe he'll have some like wide receiver 3 kind of fantasy relevance with upside week to week. That's kind of the way I look at Chris Olave.
It is tough though, because even Michael Thomas wasn't super productive at Ohio State, and then Terry McLaurin was off a lot of people's radars. So you look at Olave, and he's been fairly productive, and it's just I feel like Terry McLaurin and Michael Thomas being so good in the NFL has just thrown everybody off, where like nobody knows what to do with Ohio State wide, and they can, if they just flash a little bit in college, it's like, oh boy, is this the next stud?
Well, the thing that pops off for me about Chris Olave is in a very talented offense, he puts up almost 1 touchdown per game. In 24 games, he has 19 touchdowns. That's 0.79 touchdowns per game. That's a nose for the end zone, especially in a very crowded offense for Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what he can definitely do there. Who else? Now, I know one of our readers, Callan, recommended Kadarius Toney for our list. And Ryan, you got a little bit excited watching Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, he was somebody I knew of him, but I wasn't really paying much attention to him. When I'm watching Florida, I'm usually watching Kyle Trask or Kyle Pitts, and that's when I watch Florida. So a guy like Kadarius Toney was flying under the radar a little bit for me, but yeah, I put on the film today, and he's good. He's explosive. He's dangerous after the catch. He has good hands. It's kind of funny. Like I watched a highlight video of him, and then I put on some like actual game film of him, and I looked up and I thought I was watching the same highlight reel because he was just making play after play in this game. And so yeah, he's definitely in this tier. I have him ranked number 12 right now in the class. He feels like somebody that can be a second rounder, both NFL draft and dynasty purposes.
He's an interesting guy. His rise this year has coincided with Kyle Trask really blowing up on the scene and Dan Mullen's system really taking in at Florida. And I just watched him last week dismantle Tennessee, running the exact same route over and over and just roasting everybody around him. Electric athlete, a little slight, but can probably patrol the middle of the field for a long time in a dynamic NFL offense, working out of the slot position, really be effective. Guys that are really good are going to get their overall draft standing suppressed this year just because of the volume. And it's really, there's a wide receiver for what everyone is looking for. If you need a smaller guy, there's 5 or 6 that are real fast. They're going to be dynamic slot players. If you need the outside tall guys, this class has those in spades. If you need the top end, is the top end, and the top 2 are dynamic. So this class is just stacked top to bottom.
Eric, who haven't we talked about who you have ranked highly? Who am I missing out on?
Seth Williams, I think we touched on him briefly, maybe. He's, I think, in Ryan's
we didn't touch on him yet, right? 6'3", 210.
Or Tamorrion Terry. I really liked Tamorrion Terry after last season. Really gets just down the field in a hurry. He's decent size, but he can go deep for sure. And really smooth athlete, but unfortunately, something wasn't right this year. I mean, a lot of things aren't right at Florida State right now, and he was not having a great season, so there is some concern there. We don't really do, but I thought his film from his sophomore season was fantastic.
Yeah, and shout out to De'Ami Brown also from North Carolina. He's put together 2 consecutive really solid seasons down there as the go-to target for Sam Howell. He's looking like a real riser, as far as draft stock goes.
Don, if you had to pick either De'Ami Brown, Tamorrion Terry, or Seth Williams, who are you going with?
I'm a huge Seth Williams fan. I'm an absolute believer in him. Was ridiculous last year when Bo Nix was playing up to par at the quarterback in Gus Malzahn's offense at Auburn. And this year, that offense has been a mess, and Nix has been a mess, and it's trickled down to Williams. So for me, I want Williams out of that grouping for sure.
Okay, so that kind of runs through your third tier, Ryan, all the way down to number 15. Now, looking at your last tier, somebody who I kind of like, but I don't think he's going to make it in the NFL, is Tutu Atwell.
Yeah.
Anybody else a fan of Tutu?
I like Tutu Atwell. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's super fast. He's just, like when he catches the ball, it can be a huge play at any given time. So he's an exciting guy to watch, but he's like 5'5", 160 pounds or something. He's tiny. I'm not sure how he's going to hold up in the NFL. You see, he's even smaller than Hollywood Brown too. Like a guy.
Yeah, he's 5'9", 150, 5'9", which is probably being generous if that's how the college lists him.
Okay.
153.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, you'll get a guy who like Hollywood Brown who can't even stay on the field hardly. Let alone be productive. I just don't really see it out of Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, completely understandable. Who else is in that range for you in this third tier?
I like Amari Rodgers from Clemson. He's stepped up big time this year with the whole Justin Ross not being available, really stepping up as the number one receiver for Trevor Lawrence. So he's doing a lot of nice things. And Marlon Williams is a real sleeper to keep an eye on. He's like 6 foot tall, 215 pounds. He looks like a running back. He kind of runs like a running back a little bit after he has the ball in his hands. And he's coming out of UCF. And UCF put Gabriel Davis into the NFL last year for the Buffalo Bills. And he's doing a lot of nice things this year. Not exactly the same player. They do a lot of things similarly, but I think there are things Marlon Williams does better after the catch.
All right, let's do a little bit of a speed round. I'm just going to run through these. If you guys know anything about them, let me know.
I'm not gonna.
It's okay. We'll try. You never know. But, Don, Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss.
Yeah, Elijah Moore gets a bad rap because he cost his team a ball game by doing the pee on the upright celebration. But a dynamic guy at Ole Miss who's got nearly 1,000 yards this year, and aside from a little bit of judgment stuff, is pretty dynamic. He's going to go in that mid-tier, the 3rd to 5th round in the NFL draft, and if he winds up in the right system, it's a name you should be aware of.
Different Fox down on Reddit asked about Shi Smith. Ryan, do you know Shi Smith, South Carolina?
Shi Smith, yeah, he kind of lived in the shadow of Deebo Samuel and Bryan Edwards. He's had some success this year, now stepping up as the number one guy. Watched a little bit of his film earlier. He looks solid. I think he'll get drafted, but he's definitely the lesser of those 3 receivers out of South Carolina the last few years. I could see him probably going in like the 5th or 6th round is where I'd assume.
Also, Don, looking at Jonathan Adams Jr., Arkansas State. Do you know him?
So I know more. He's another 1,000-yard receiver this year. They play at a small school. The Arkansas State is College Bowl subdivision, if I'm not mistaken. I might be off base on that one, but they do play in a absolute pass-happy kind of air raid style offense. If I remember, I looked him up earlier. He's a senior. Good size, good speed. He's kind of just got that small
6'3", 220.
Yeah, he's got that small school label on him, but definitely a player. He's going to go later, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him get into the draft process and make a lot of rising star lists or a lot of sleepers to know lists.
Yeah, Broadly from Reddit asked about him, and he also asked about Jalen Darden from North Texas, the Mean Green. Anybody know about Mean Green players?
Yeah, I'm a little familiar with Darden. I watched a lot of Mason Fine the last couple of years.
Okay.
So, yeah, Darden, I don't know if he's going to get drafted or not. He's good. He has good hands. He's kind of a crafty guy. He's fast, but not that fast. He's really small. He's like 5'9", 175, I believe.
Yep.
So, yeah, kind of a smaller guy, small school, but he's productive.
Yeah.
He might get drafted.
He is. He's put up 222 receptions for over 2,600 yards and 34 TDs. That's 0.74 TDs a game. Now, I know it's at, for the Mean Green, but that's still impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
At any level. Let's see. Anybody left on my list? Marquez Stevenson. For our fur. I don't even know what that means. But asked about Marquez Stevenson from Houston. Does anybody know Marquez Stevenson?
Okay, so I typically tend to not trust Houston wide receivers, and the reason for that is they roll this crazy offense that they throw the ball around a lot, so it artificially inflates their numbers, particularly at the quarterback position and the wide receiver position. So I, as a rule, don't trust Houston wide receivers to go to the next level simply because they do everything with scheme, and they're on that lower tier of scouting and recruiting anyway. Houston fans won't like that, but they are. And it's just the system and situation. So they haven't put out much in terms of pro talent lately. And I feel like this is going to be the next guy in that list that's going to get a look, and that's what he's going to get.
I mean, to finish us off, the last guy that you listed, Ryan, is Daz Newsome from North Carolina. I know we talked a little bit about Diami Brown, Eric. What can we tell me about Daz Newsome?
Daz Newsome is Diami Brown's running mate. They're both very productive. Daz Newsome, I was a little bit higher on him earlier this season. He's been a little up and down. But yeah, he's probably better than the 20th receiver in this class, if I'm being honest. But there's just so many good receivers in this class. You can't have 30 in the top 20. And yeah, I think he'll be a slot receiver. I think he'll end up going in like the 5th or 6th round, and he'll be a solid, like a number 4 type receiver for an NFL team for a long time.
And does anybody call him the Tasmanian Devil?
No, but they should now.
That's our new name. I hope he makes it in the NFL so we can use that. Eric, is there anybody else you want to talk about at the wide receiver position?
There's not. I can't think of another name, but I have a thought on the wide receiver draft and the draft class as a whole.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's easy to get excited, and this certainly, I mean, you guys are completely right. It's a super deep class, and there's a lot of talent at the top end. Constant reminder that some of these guys who are juniors and redshirt sophomores may end up going back to school. And this year, you could even seniors go back to school with that added year of eligibility that the NCAA gave out. So just something to keep in mind as you get further down these lists, that what looks like 15 day 1 and 2 talents to 8 to 10.
Yep. And
Very
this
true.
is all early in the process. This is before the combine, before the Senior Bowl games, and before the pro scouts really get a full-on look at these guys. And everything can change. Rankings can change. And with next year's wide receiver class definitely taking a step back from last year in this, there's a real potential for some of these higher end guys that have the eligibility and are returning to a quality quarterback situation to go back to school to try and climb that ladder and make themselves some more money next year.
All right. We are running long, but we should hit the tight ends. So luckily, tight ends are never too deep of a class. Coming up at number 1 on your list, Ryan, is, of course, Kyle Pitts. Why should I draft a tight end who can't block?
How good can Jimmy Graham block?
I don't care how Jimmy Graham blocks.
Exactly.
Oh, that's your point. Thank you.
Because
that's all I needed to know.
Blocking is not a fantasy metric.
So he's like Evan Ingram. He plays out wide. He might as well be just like Mike Gesicki.
Oh, he's way better than Evan Ingram.
But the same idea that they're split wide.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not really a
Yeah.
tight end. They're more
They're
of
a wide receiver in a
slot.
tight end's body.
They're just a big matchup nightmare.
So does everybody agree that Kyle Pitts is number 1?
Oh,
Yeah.
It's not close.
Absolutely.
So in a tight end premium league, where are we taking Kyle Pitts? With the knowledge that first-year tight ends generally pan out.
Without knowing what situation he's stepping into, he's still probably a first-round rookie draft guy in a tight end premium situation.
Absolutely first round. If he gets the right situation, like goes to a team such as, I don't know, say Arizona, you could be looking at a top 5 selection here, especially if it's like a 1.75, 2.0 points per reception. Oh yeah.
Right.
I've even seen mocks having him going to Dallas.
That'd be fun too.
That would be ridiculous. They need to focus on defense, so they should just calm down. Coming in at number 2, actually there's a tie for number 2, Pat Freiermuth. Of course, since he is from Penn State, I will go to Don Detweiler.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh.
No, I'm going to Eric. You know that. Go
My
ahead, Eric.
disappointment was just
Palpable.
limitless. Pat Freiermuth is an awesome player. another guy who had a great season last year and then came back this year, and that whole Penn State offense is a disaster. And then he's ended up banged up and he's out an injury. So I don't think he's going to go back to school. I think he's going to come into the draft, but a little bit of risk there. But he's a guy who can both block and play a role as a receiver. He's not a burner, but he is solid after the catch, and he's not afraid to put his pads down and run through you. So he's just been a really fun player to watch. I really like him.
What about Brevin Jordan, Don?
So Brevin Jordan's another kind of one of these new age space tight ends, hyper athletic, big dude, but matchup nightmare, kind of like a light version of Pitts because they do similar things in their respective offenses. He's not a guy who's going to be an inline tight end at all.
All right, looking at the rest of the class real quickly, Kenny Yeboah out of Ole Miss.
He's a Parkland guy.
Is he really?
Yeah, he went to Temple for 4 years, and then he
grad transfer.
Yeah.
That's right, because I have the Temple pipeline in that league, and I lost him because he transferred.
Yeah, that's a drag.
That's tough.
Yeah, he looked great against Alabama. He had over 180 yards, just torched Bama's, and he's looked pretty good in other games too. So he's definitely a name to keep.
Now, of course, going back to tight end Iowa State, Charlie Kolar, 6'6", 257. Kolar the Barbarian. What's up with him, Don?
This is the second true inline tight end, like classic style tight end, along with Freiermuth, who can fit into any offense and block effectively and then get out into space, which is kind of a lost skill set now. I have him as tight end 4 in this class, and I like him. I think he's going to be a second or third round pick in the real NFL draft, and he's somebody you should be aware of.
Hunter Long from Boston College, Ryan?
Yeah, he's just a productive tight end. He looks good on film. He's a good receiver. I'm not sure how high to be on him because I'm not exactly a tight end expert, unless it's Kyle Pitts. But anyway,
I'm not saying a word. You just keep going.
He has a Devi man crush on Kyle Pitts.
All right, that's fair enough. There was a request from Different Fox on Reddit to talk about James Mitchell out of Va Tech. Eric, that's down in your neck of the woods. You love Virginia, so obviously you have to know about Virginia Tech. Tell me about him.
I mean, I am familiar with him. He's a junior, so I think there's some risk, especially this is, one of the stronger tight end classes that we've seen in recent years, and with everything going on this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to school. But he is starting to produce a little bit. We saw Dalton Keene get drafted out of Virginia Tech last year. He's another guy who I think can be used as a weapon. They've even kind of lined him up in the backfield and given them those little kind of shovel pass handoff things. So
more than that, Eric, he has rushed the ball 7 times. Guess how many rushing touchdowns he has?
3.
Could it be 7?
Ryan?
7. That was my guess.
5.
Woo!
7 rushes, 5 yards, I think, and 5 touchdowns. He's like the Jerome Bettis in his final year.
Big man gonna big.
But that's pretty impressive. You're right, Eric. If he's scoring as a running back, even in short yardage, that's a skill.
Right. And I mean, yeah, that's the sort of thing, you can move him around and just do all sorts of different things with him. I don't know if it was Jalen Samuels, who was kind of like a weird pass-catching fullback in college and came out and, hasn't had a huge role, but that's the sort of the guy who can definitely stick on an NFL roster.
Well, I think teams are going to have to start utilizing when they get down to the goal line, instead of lining up in like a 2 tight end heavy set. I mean, they could go 5 wide, splitting out James Mitchell, motion him to the backfield and run a dive. You have to use these matchups, and I see very few teams do that when they get to the goal line. They all go into these goal line formations and try to run the goddamn ball.
That. Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Spread it out. Especially when you have, if you're the Chiefs, and, maybe they do it less than other teams anyways, but, some of these teams with a real quarterback, like, what are you doing? Spread it out. Let him see the field and make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't get paid the big bucks. I'm going to ask, are there any other tight ends that we need to talk about? But I think talking about 7 tight ends in college football is probably deeper than anybody's ever discussed. college tight ends.
At least in
So
December.
is there at least in December?
It's an exhaustive
I mean, this
list.
is sick. It's exhaustive. All right, gentlemen, it is time for tags, where we share our final thoughts and let the riders know where they can find us. Go ahead, Don.
All right. So if you truly need me, you can get a hold of me at the Rider Dynasty, or get a hold of JJ or one of the other guys, and they'll get information to me. But my final thought here is we're coming up on the anniversary of one of the most significant games in college football every year. The Army-Navy game this year will be played this weekend at 3 o'clock on CBS, and it will be coming to you live from West Point, the first time that has happened since World War II. These guys sign up to give it all for us. It's their time to get their week. Army-Navy game is an absolute classic.
Eric?
Well, I don't have anything as meaningful to say as that, but you can find me on Twitter at Eric Braunmower, and it's getting to be that season, so hit me up with your draft questions if you have any. I love talking draft prospects, and I'll be doing a lot of that the next 4 months.
Very, very excited. Ryan?
You can find me on Twitter at the Devy Dirtbag, also on Reddit user at the Devy Dirtbag. And I'll catch you in the next one.
I'm at JJ Wenner. I'm on Reddit at IDP Thoughts. If you or someone you love is thinking of hurting themselves, please contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. It's the holidays. COVID is ramping up. Schools are shutting down. Businesses are shutting down. People are going to be depressed. Reach out to the people you love. Let them know you love them. Even if you don't think they need it, somebody needs it, so do it. So from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends. Boat drink.
JJ, I know you're going to listen to the end of this. I don't know if it'll ever make it on a pod or anything, but I just want you to know that you're fantastic. Love you, buddy.